was never a fan of staying late at school, but that day was an exception. I had a pile of tests to correct before the meeting of parents and masters the next day, so I decided to face it all alone in the classroom after normal hours. The school is in an old building, with that floor that range when you walk in windows that seem to have seen better days. I was there, sitting on my table, surrounded by empty wallets and a heavy silence that only those who have already stayed in such a place after the office knows how it is. The kind of silence that seems to watch you. By 20H, I had already corrected about 15 tests and was starting to feel the weight of loneliness. That's when the intercom called out of nowhere, and a light smell of mold, like a damp cemetery earth, invaded the room even before the sound. I almost got a scare when I heard the robotic and distorted voice announcing an immediate lockdown. But it made no sense at all. Lockdown? At that time? No notice? I tried to call the janitor to ask what was happening, but my cell phone was not a signal inside the school. Something that always happens in this old building. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, trying to understand if this was some kind of play or technical error, but the sound of the intercom abruptly turned me off with a cold in my pimple. I decided that the best thing to do was to stay where it was. After all, if there was any reason for that lockdown, I didn't want to run through the dark corridors of the school without knowing what was waiting for me outside. I locked the room door with the key I always carry and pushed one of the students' wallets against the doorknob, just by precaution. In the meantime, I started hearing some noises from the hallway. At first, I thought it was just the wind hitting the old windows, but I soon realized they were steps light, almost imperceptible but constant, and they were coming towards my room. My heart began to accelerate, and I tried to convince myself that I could be the caretaker doing a round. But why would he make a round at that time? And why did the steps seem so irregular? I took my cell phone again, desperately trying to find a signal or at least send a message to someone. Anyone. Nothing. The silence in the room was cut only by the sound of my breathing and the steps closer and closer. I looked through the small window of the door, trying to see who or what was out there, but the hallway was too dark. He had a light flashing at the end of the hallway, and it only made things worse, creating strange shadows that seemed to move alone. It was then that I saw something that made me cold. A figure passing by the corner of my vision, leaving a trail of thin scratches on the wall next to the door, as if long nails had shaved the paint. It was not possible to see right, but I was sure I was not alone. I moved away from the door slowly, trying not to make noise. My mind was 1,000, thinking of all the possibilities. Had any thief entered? Or worse, someone with bad intentions? The school was in a quiet neighborhood, but that didn't mean much. What made me more nervous was the fact that I couldn't hear anything but those light steps, as if they were purposely calculated to make me even more tense. That's when I realized something strange. The sound seemed to be coming from more than one direction at the same time. First on the left side of the door, after the right, and sometimes it even seemed to echo from behind the room. I didn't know where to look anymore, and it was starting to go crazy. I decided I needed to leave, lockdown or not. I took my backpack and started thinking about what to do. The room window was an option, but it was tall and it gave a small lawn surrounded by shrubs. It would not be impossible to escape there, but I would have to risk it. Before I could make any decision, I heard a sound that made me completely paralyzed. A kind of scratch on the door. It was not strong, but it was constant, as if someone was testing the doorknob or trying to open without much effort. My whole body was tense, and I could feel my heart beating so loud that I thought that whoever was on the other side could hear too. The scratching suddenly stopped, and for a moment I thought maybe it was just my imagination preaching pieces. But then I heard something even worse. A light breath, almost inaudible, across the door. It wasn't like someone's breathing, striving, or running. It was slow, controlled, as if anyone who was expecting something, or someone. I could no longer reason right. My head was full of unanswered questions, but the fear was so great that I could barely think of any coherent plan. That's when I realized that I had left my cell phone on the table, too far to reach without exposing myself. He was completely alone in that room, without any way to ask for help. I started to sweat cold, and my hands trembled so much that I could barely hold the backpack. I tried to calm down, telling myself that it should be some kind of mistake, that soon everything was going to be resolved. But deep down I knew it was not normal. That sound, those steps, none of this made sense. And the worst thing was that it seemed that the intruder, that is, whatever, was playing with me, testing me, seeing how far I could stand there without freaking out. Suddenly I heard a metallic click from the door. Someone was trying to open the lock, and by the way the sound echoed, you could realize that they knew exactly what they were doing. My stomach rolled, and I knew at that moment that I needed to get out of there. It cost what it cost. In thinking twice, I ran to the window and started trying to open it. She was old and stuffed, and the sound of the rusty latch ranging seemed to echo across the whole room. I stopped for a moment, my heart in my throat, when I saw by the corner of my eye the shadow under the door moves, as if long and crooked fingers tried to slide underneath, looking for the floor of the room. I stopped for a second, afraid that anyone outside the door had heard it too. But there was no time to hesitate. With one last push, the window finally gave way, and a breath of cold air entered, making the loose leaves of the tests fly on the floor. I looked down and saw the dark lawn below. It didn't seem so far, but my mind was so overwhelmed that any fall seemed deadly at that moment. I took a deep breath and prepared to jump. It was then that I heard a different noise, a loud click, as if the door had been unlocked, followed by a low and muffled whisper on the other side, as if something murmured my name in a voice that didn't seem human. I froze in place, looking back unintentionally. The doorknob began to spin slowly, ranging as if invisible fingers, and I knew it was a few seconds before that thing, or whatever it was, entered the room. Without thinking more, I leaned my hands on the window railing and jumped. The impact on the ground was greater than I expected, and I felt a sharp pain in my ankle, but there was no time to feel pain. I got up staggering and started running toward the school's main gate, hoping it was still open. Each step was echoing in the silence of the night, and I could swear I heard something or someone coming behind me. I arrived at the gate and, luckily, he was unlocked. I pushed with all the strength I still had and ran down the dark street, without looking back. My ankle throbbed every step, but fear was greater than any physical pain. As I ran, I tried to convince myself that I was safe now, that I had escaped. But something inside me said it was not over. When I finally stopped on a corner to recover my breath, I realized that my cell phone was still in the room. There was no way to call police or ask for help. I was completely alone in the middle of the night, not understanding what the hell had happened at that school. I returned home staggers, dirty and too scared to sleep, the sound of that whisper still echoing in my head. The next day, I went to school with the police, hoping to find some sign of what had happened. But everything was normal. The doors were locked. The intercom had no records of any lockdown ad, and no one could explain what had happened. Only one student asked, with a strange look, because there were marks of dirty hands on the room window inside, as if something had tried to leave after I escaped. To this day, when I think that night, I feel a shiver on my spine. Whatever with me in that room, I will never find out. And honestly, I think it's better that way.